When I was on the property, I think it was last year, I was in one of the sheds on the property, and it has a glass window there, and there was a hole in the window, and I said to one of the guys, I said, "What's that?" And they said, "That was the last attempt of Billy, 22 caliber. Holy Christ. You know, I mean, it's just like, you know, and in the film, of course, Billy talks about how he avoided being assassinated also, you know, by a handgun attack, and he got a lot of guidance from his own dreams protected him.
I was just going to say, yeah, isn't that, did he get a vision in one of his dreams about wearing a metal plate over his chest? Yeah, and then it actually happened.
Yes, the person shot at him pretty close range.
And the plate's what saved him.
Had he not put the metal plate in a little agenda book in his breast pocket, he would be dead.
Yeah, that's incredible. I have a question. There's a couple more. I mean, there's so much to talk about. I know we're running out of time here. There was a couple photographs on your site there. These are definitely on your site. There were a couple where he claims to have been inside the craft when he was taking the photographs. So one of them's, well, they're both really cool, but one in particular kind of has like a pinkish haze with the number 04 written up in the top left. Do you remember that photograph?
Yeah, there's two. There's actually, I think, a total of three. Two for sure, but three, I think, in total. And he was inside the ship, and he took it through their screen. And there were problems from some form of radiation. Don't forget, this is back in the 70s. He's using film cameras and all that. But even though there was some problem with the radiation, you have pictures outside the windows. In one case, you can see some of the ground and stuff, and two discs in the distance. Yeah,
that's cool. I like that one.
Yeah.
So the discolorization, he says, was caused probably by that radiation?
Yeah, that seemed to have been the problem.
Okay. Now, I want to talk about, you know, I guess while we're there, let's talk about his trip through our solar system. This was with the Plejarans?
Yeah.
Okay. Just a second. Before we go into that, Michael, I was confused because I thought maybe that was the only extraterrestrial group that was communicating with him, but you seem to indicate there was more than one group.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, I have to bend away from the thing here.
That's okay.
There is a group called the Doll, from the Doll universe, called the Timurs. Asket is from that group. All of these groups have a common origin in their distant ancestry, so to speak. And Asket was his second teacher after the first Plejaran teacher, whose name was Sva.
Okay.
Yeah. So she and her people, also their background was from the Lyra constellation, but her people, they live now in an adjoining universe, not solar system or galaxy, but universe to us.
Wow. Okay.
It gets pretty interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of information definitely for people to go ahead and check that stuff out. I want to talk about while he's still in those ships. You know, referring to those pictures we were talking about just a few seconds ago. He actually, the story is that he's traveled through our solar system with the Plejarans, and that's how he you know, had firsthand accounts of some of the information that he's put out about, you know, the state of Io and life on Mars. Am I correct in assuming that it's partially because of this trip he took through the solar system?
Yes, exactly.
What happened there? It's an amazing story.
Things, but they also took. I mean, he described the scientific information about Venus a year before the probes ever got there, right down to the coloration of the terrain, the thickness of the cloud bank, the composition of gases, the speed and direction of the winds. And then the Russians and the U.S. finally get probes there. It's exactly the same.
And he's actually got satellites in some of these photographs that aren't even supposed to be there yet. Is that right?
It's probably, Randy Winters showed some of they're called the space photos. The problem is Meier isn't certain. I mean, remember, he took photographs of Mars and the U.S. satellites and different things, but he's not sure if some of these things got mixed by the authorities and altered in any way. So he simply says, I'm not going to stand behind the space photos that are out there because we don't know if those were tampered with. But indeed, I mean, he described all the things that, you know, his trips to these different places and what he was seeing, and oh yeah, I mean, it's amazing stuff.
I'm pretty blown away actually by his touchdown on the surface of Mars, or what he claims, you know, was the surface of Mars. and he's seen, apparently he saw dust storms, huge storms, and the surface of the planet. What does he say about Mars, touching down there?
I think he said that the sunset is blue. He was allowed to walk around Olympus Mons volcano with Ptah. It used to house a lot of ancient stations, technology from other humans that had lived there long ago before the planet was destroyed, but that evidence has been removed since then. We won't find it anymore. But there was human civilizations on Mars. There were human civilizations there long ago. And, this is what's so bizarre. We can talk about this. The fact that when you sit and talk to Billy, he's a very straight-ahead, gentle, ordinary human being. And you're sitting there thinking, just yesterday, Billy was in one of these objects with these people, or they were in his office.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. What are you going to do with this,
Yeah, and he actually took photographs, apparently, of this trip through the solar system of the planets. And I've seen some of them, and they're pretty interesting. It's a pretty big story. I want to talk about, this is going to sound crazy to a lot of people listening right now, but I want to talk about Jesus Christ at this point. Because I know that there was some interaction that has something to do with time travel that Billy really doesn't like talking about. He doesn't really like talking about time travel for some particular reason, but he says that it has happened, and I hope I have the information straight here, and that he actually went back in time to meet the real Jesus Christ.
Yeah, because there was nobody ever named Jesus Christ.
Right.
And there is a website that has the transcript up on it. I'll send you a link to that, too.
Yeah.
So much. We can just forever. But the story with that is that the Jesus Christ figure was based on a man whose name was Emmanuel. And I was not a biblical scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but when I went into the Old Testament, I found that in Isaiah is mentioned, 7:14, I think, is mention of Emmanuel. Mm-hmm. Isaiah foretells the coming prophet will be named Emmanuel. In the New Testament, then, one time in Matthew, while Jesus is being born, quote unquote, they let it slip. And he says, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. And the name Emmanuel ends up in various Christmas songs and things like that. Why this name Emmanuel, and why don't we know anything about it? Well, it has been very well concealed by the church, by the religions, that this man did live but wasn't known by that name, that he was crucified but didn't die, that he ended up after the crucifixion, after surviving it, going with various family members and disciples into India. It's an amazing story. And even more amazing is that in this material, Meier is taken back by Asket, the 32 AD, with another guy who happens into their camp by accident, a Russian. And they go back there and they go and meet Emmanuel and some of the disciples. And Billy has a very interesting conversation with Emmanuel. And you can read that for yourself. I've sent you the link to that because that link is a little hard to just tell.
Yeah.
I'm glad to try and help if I can, but it's in what are called the Asket Contact Reports at the Future of Mankind website. So you'll have that there in your inbox and stick it up there if you want. It's a very, very interesting conversation. And, of course, Meier is the co-discoverer of a document called the Talmud Emmanuel, which is supposedly the original teaching and writing of Emmanuel, upon which the book of Matthew was based, not the other way around. And this is highly controversial. Wherever Meier is, controversy is very thick.
Definitely, especially in this whole realm of time travel. Why does he not want to talk about time travel?
He didn't want to talk primarily about the future, because one of the things for sure is the coming mega earthquake in San Francisco. And he photographed that. In other words, what I'm telling your audience is there is a huge earthquake that is going to hit San Francisco. It's not a prophecy, it's prediction. It occurs. He photographed it when he went with Semyaze forward in time in 1978. What? Okay. He is talking to the investigators in 1978, sitting around the famous kitchen table there. Something comes up, and he mentions the San Francisco earthquake, and they said, you mean the one from 1906? He says, no, the one that hasn't happened yet. And they go, what are you talking about? He says, well, wait here, I'll be right back. And he goes to the office, gets one of those little Kodak envelopes, yellow envelopes, and then throws 11 photographs on the kitchen table. And it's funny, we're talking about this today because I recently put up a blog with something that I'll mention here. They're looking at photographs, and by golly, they're not paintings, they're photographs. It is San Francisco. It's on fire. There's smoke. Buildings have collapsed. Cars and things are disrupted in the street. There's buildings are leaning into other buildings. Something really has happened here. And they were trying to figure out, Wendell Stevens is thinking, how can we figure out when this happens? Well, if it's in the future, how are you going to figure out when it happens? So Wendell looks down at the cars on the street, because there's 11 photographs, and some of them are showing the cars pretty clearly, he said.
Yeah. And
he says, in 1970, he says, the cars don't look like the cars of today. They're not big boats with fins on the back. They're smaller, basically rounder, with more glass extending up into the roofs, and they don't have any protuberances on the outside, no rear view mirrors. Well, in case you don't know, several car companies, the latest one being Nissan, have come out with concept cars with a lot of glass, looking, of course we have the Beetles and other cars that have a lot of glass already now, and different models of Fords and SUVs and things with lots of glass. But they don't have rear view mirrors, these new concept cars. They're using camera technology, displaying everything on a screen inside the car.
Wow.
How would Wendell Stevens have known that in 1978?
Are these photos available as well?
No.
Okay. And that is that part of Wendell Stevens' personal collection?
No. What happened was Billy was not supposed to have shown those photos to anybody.
Okay.
And when the Play-Iron found out that he did, they took him back. And they said, that wasn't for anybody else to see. That was for you. We took you, so you photographed. Those were for you. So we're taking him home because you've been a naughty boy. So, Billy's a human being. I mean, and he wanted to share that stuff.
But Wendell saw that.
Wendell saw it, and so did the two other investigators. And so did a couple of the people that were there in the kitchen at the time. So those things were seen by other people. Now, I just posted in my blog on the 20th, I posted, a kind of multi-piece blog updating some news stuff that included a link to that new Nissan, concept car without the rear view mirrors and with a lot of glass on it. So this is one, and if I go back just for a second and I talk about the Cal Corp thing, I talk about this, talk about, the moons of Io, you have to see there's a preponderance of congruent, non-self-contradictory evidence. And this is what somebody who can start to, I think you've been doing this. If you've been looking at all this stuff, you've been thinking your way through it. The skeptics don't do that. They try to find something to latch onto that they have a belief system about, and then they want to tell you it's not true. But this stuff doesn't trip on itself. Meier doesn't do that. This is just what it is.
Yeah. See, the problem I have, it's not necessarily a problem. It's just that I've never really been able to prove this case to myself as being real or a hoax, because there's just so much data and so much evidence that you can't close the book on Billy Meier. That's why I wanted to have you on the program, because I needed my part of the world to hear the story of Bill and to hear how hard you've been working to get this information out. Now, I know, we've been on, together here in this interview for well over an hour.